And here we are for a Sunday morning, Dualistic Unity Raw. And by morning, it is Sunday morning or Sunday morning, however you'd like to say it. Anyway, by morning, I also mean 1 p.m. Eastern time because we have a new schedule, which means that I did not have to wake up at 7 a.m. I actually had an opportunity to sleep in till about 8:30, 9 o'clock, woke up, stretched, did a little exercise, which was great because last week when we went camping, I had a bit of an accident, which I've been healing from ever since. And so it was nice to get up and be mobile and just have some time to get up and kind of appreciate the morning. Not that I haven't previously, but it was nice to just sleep a little extra, wake up a little later, start with a little bit of a different pace. Because I've noticed, and I was thinking about this on Friday, I want to say Friday, because some of our episodes were like 8:30 in the morning, sometimes I get up at like 8:15, 8:05, and I just like get up, smoke a joint, grab my coffee, and get onto the mic. I'm like, all right, let's see what pops out of my brain hole now. But having this new schedule going into it, I wonder how much that's going to change the conversation. I wonder very much how that's going to change even just the pace, because I think different things during the day.
Right.
By the evening, I am not talking about much. It's kind of like everything's done its thing by then. I'm easing through the day, right? But in the morning, it's all just fucking, here it all is, process, motherfucker. And so it's been fun to do that on the episodes. But yeah, wondering how this is going to change things. Apparently, 10 a.m., still rambling.
Which is awesome, because it does, like, in the morning, I find that a lot of my experiences, like, stuff will be going through my head, and like all these things that I'm maybe thinking about for throughout my day, or things that happened, and it's more of that thinking. And then, especially here, man, like by the end of the day, I feel like there's been such a long amount of time. Like the days really have felt a lot longer. And again, because we're doing a lot of different things, but also like the amount of ups and downs of like fluctuations of like feelings and whatnot, and like the fullness of those experiences, and then remembering that it's always about my response to what's going on, like my aversion to certain things or certain feelings popping up or experiences, whether it's like feeling nervous or anxious or reserved or assuming you're doing something wrong, in an experience, and then responding right away and being like, yeah, but that's just my assumption. Like, I don't know what the external really is seeing or what their view. And so, we really are just like, this experience is very, very, very personal, and so everything that you go through is about just your response to reality. And that's all I got.
That's a good response to reality. You're like, that seemed like the end to me.
Yeah. No, I love it. I like the way that you had put it earlier today, Andrew. We were like, your response is the experience. And I don't think of a better way. I don't think there is a better way at this moment to describe that, because it seems very complete. Your response is the experience, because your response isn't the hypothetical that you worry about. Your experience isn't that hypothetical. And your response is creating this hypothetical to respond to. But the hypothetical isn't the actual response. And it's so funny because they overlap so beautifully and so seamlessly. But it is very much, it's a very important consideration, because when you don't pay attention to your responses, it's very easy to blame them on others. Like, you made me angry. You made me happy. You made me scared. It's, even in the way that we speak, a lot of our common phrases put so much of the responsibility on the external, and not on how you create an experience of the external through your response to it.
Oh yeah. Like we are the external too, And so that response, like, it is fascinating how much we can pass off to like other experiences to make you feel better or make you feel worse. And again, it's that trade, like looking forward to a situation or thinking about another place to be or another situation in your life, or looking back at certain times, like looking back at the good old days, or looking forward to another experience, once I do this or accomplish this or achieve this. And like none of it like does you any good. None of it does you any good, but it can help you to feel like it's like a hit, like eating dessert or something. Like it can make you feel just not bad enough, like give you a little hit of feeling okay, just because you're thinking differently, just because you're kind of like covering up reality with a slightly shinier veil, but it's still being covered up, and you're still like not in control at all of how someone's going to look at you or see you. And so those responses to things, about whatever we're going through are just so irrelevant. But you start like we can get into routines of being super habitual, with how we live and how we go throughout our day, like, right. So we don't think about it, but it's because it's habitual, versus when things aren't as habitual, then it's like there's more opportunity to think about it. But then you can also like not think about it and it not be as habitual. And then it's more, I don't know, like free or close to flow or whatever that is. But it's been interesting seeing how many responses have been habitual and looking at those, and then what's left can be kind of jarring sometimes.
Absolutely. I remember I had this insight or something similar to it a couple of years back, and I brought it up on the podcast, that habit over time actually takes on the appearance of intelligence. It appears that we're doing something intelligent because at one point, the origin of it was intelligence, processing something. Now it's just assumption of similarity. Yeah. That's the only reason you can get into the habit, is the assumption that you're going to keep going through the same thing. Right? Every day is the same. Every bus trip to work's the same. Every day at work is the same. And that's ridiculous. Right? It can't be. And so once you recognize that, you're like, no, it's not intelligence. Immediately you start to be more aware, because now you're uncertain again. Right? Habit, it's a real bitch, because it really does take on the appearance of thinking. Because there was thinking at its core. There was, or rather intelligence. There was intelligence at its core once upon a time. Right? And it's still exercising it based on that. And isn't that funny? It's like, I'm going to bank everything on my intelligence once upon a time, but not my intelligence now.
Oh, yeah. And like this, for example, this live stream, like I can assume that, we've done so many of these and this is the case and this is along the lines of what we talk about. And I can have this sort of sense of this being the same, and therefore I'm going to be the same. And then like based on that habitual sort of look or assumption about something, then we almost like not try to create the same experience of ourselves, but it can be more comfortable, even if it is uncomfortable, instead of just getting back to not necessarily assuming that you're doing something wrong. Like even right now, as I'm slowing down, like feeling myself kind of panicking as I run out of feeling like I have something to say. And my habitual response is to be like afraid of that. And then it kind of tumbles, but it's like, okay, but it's still my response right now. And like, if I'm not having this super strong aversion to petering off, then you can almost regulate a lot more quickly.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
That was great.
I love it, because it does feel like a ride, and it does feel exciting and terrifying at certain times. But but it's still quite the experience. And I love it. Just being able to kind of pay attention and see like, where's there an opening? I'm going to jump in. I was like, oh, wait, is that it? No, that wasn't it. And then it'll feel exactly like that. I was like, wait, this is it. Right. I'm primed. I'm ready. No. All right. It's going to come, and then jumping in and be like, shit, we jumped in. What are we going to say? But at least it feels authentic. It feels alive. It feels like it's happening in real time. I don't feel like I'm rushing to catch up or that I've missed something when I've jumped in, and that's where I have the opportunity to use all of that attention and to pay attention to my response. And as I'm paying attention, having as much fun as I can, being able to absorb as much as I can. We're talking about these habits, and it's like, yeah, sometimes, you think you do want to follow a habitual path, but there is no silver bullet plan. There is no if then equation, because things will never be the same circumstances time after time. Even if it does look similar, it is slightly different. I used to live on the third floor of an apartment building, and I would go up and down the same flight of stairs, right? And I'm like, technically these stairs are one day older, and that is one more terrifying layer because they were so old. It's almost like, is this it? Is this the final time we go up or down these stairs? Will I be trapped up there? I'm gonna have to crawl out my bathroom window to go out to the fire escape. Like it felt very similar. It looked very similar. Almost nothing felt different about that, except I knew that it was different, that it was a little older. And that was easy, right? That was easy to keep in mind, that technically the stairs are always one day older. Because it's that fear that kind of makes me want to remember that. But even when it's not a scary thing, even the person that you encounter, I'm sitting with you guys, both of you. I've sat with you dozens and dozens of times. This is unlike any of those other times. And we've sat in the same arrangement of chairs, but we are all different. I woke up and I'm feeling rested. And for right now, that feels pretty complete, in terms of describing the way that I'm feeling right now. But give me 5 minutes and we might be freaking out about not jumping in, or waiting to jump in, or waiting for our moments, or paying attention to what you guys are saying, or looking at the comments and waving on both screens and trying to make sure that everyone feels like I'm listening. And I'm like, we're just going to sit here too.
And like things will keep changing too. Because even when you are like, ooh, maybe there's going to be a point where I'm feeling a little more anxious or nervous, like there's also going to be a point where that, peters off and quiets down. But it is interesting, like how comfortable we can get with reality too, like paying attention to walking up the stairs, like, is this going to be like, there's almost a necessity to it. And reality does have a way of reminding you also when you're not paying attention. Like last night I had some oatmeal and it was scalding hot, and I did not see any steam coming off it. And so I mixed it up and scooped it, and just like, I put it on a rice cake. So it was like on top of that. And so I bit into it. And so it was all pressed against the top of my mouth and like burned the fuck out of the top of my mouth, and like the skin peeled off a little bit. And just another opportunity. You're like, oh yeah, slow down, pay attention. All right, check in. Don't be trying to do too many things at once. But there is a much more relaxing experience that goes along with paying attention, because I feel like this sense of, sort of thoughts that you'll hear or feel, like you can start to get a sense for the best, most appropriate thing to do in a moment. And sometimes because, certain feelings like that you want to respond to, maybe you've done it with working out, like senses of lack or whatever, you respond to it in certain ways, maybe working out or eating tasty food. And then sometimes you start going into something totally was your train of thought. Oh man,
it's funny, you sent me spiraling into one myself.
Right, me too.
It's funny. Well, I think that's why I enjoy the podcast so much, is because we tend to go on different tangents based on where other eddies take us. But that, I mean, there's the sobering part of reality right there, is when you really start to look at a lot of your behavior with a certain degree of self-honesty, you see that a lot of it is just a different type of soother. Because when you were a baby, when you were crying, your parents gave you a soother.
Mhm.
It may have been, one of the soothers you suck on. It might have been a blanket. It could have been your teddy bear, but it was something to soothe you. And over time, we've developed our own soothers, but we don't look at it that way because that couldn't be. Right? But when you stop and you sit and you look at it and you actually go, oh, wow, yeah, a lot of what I do is just meant to make me feel better about my life. Then you're left with that very sobering feeling. And that is one of my favorite sounds. I don't know, listener, if you could hear Andrew making that sound, but it was the exasperated sigh of someone who's just reconciled that there's nowhere to fucking go. And it's just that. It's just, and so suddenly you're left with just you in the room. And it doesn't feel satisfying, and it doesn't feel like a high. It doesn't feel like anything. In fact, you're like, I don't even know what to feel about this. And that's perfect. That's life. That's actually life happening right there. But it's that recognition that you can try and soothe yourself till the day you die. And a lot of people do. But you'll never be free as long as that's happening, because you always need to be soothed. You're always looking for something to comfort you. Why? Because you feel overwhelmed, because you feel afraid, because you feel like you're not enough. Those aren't built in. Those are optional. And through experience, you begin to learn adaptability. You begin to learn what your potential is. You begin to see different things. But it's always so very tempting to have a list of things that make your life better, of things that make you feel like you're on the path. It's always easier to have that list, whether it's spirituality or a way of dressing or a way of acting or a way of eating or a way of talking or a way of interacting with the community. If these things make you better, they are soothers. And you're just trying to avoid what you would be without them. And it's so important to take that list and ask yourself, well, if you didn't have access to these things, and do deliberately put yourself in a conscious state where you can see yourself in a world or in a lifetime or as a character that doesn't have access to these things. Does that mean that you've lost your potential? Does that mean that you cannot find peace, that you cannot find your own strength, that you cannot live your life here, now, in the fucking moment, in reality, just because you don't have these things? Ask yourself that. And don't assume that you can get those things in that life. What if they're never going to be available? Are you fucked? Because that sounds like another story. And if it's a story there, it's a story here. You don't need the list of things that make you feel better about things. Just be yourself. That's the challenge. You can put down the soother, and that's what we call growing up.
That list of things becomes very much prison in a sense. Like, as much as you look to it to feel better, you think about it to feel better. It's like you almost have to be doing those things or thinking about doing them or preparing to do them in order to feel okay with yourself. And as soon as you're not doing it as much, as soon as you're, in another situation, all the reasons that you do those things start to be felt, start to be seen, start to be looked at, because their responses, again, they're coping, they're soothers, there's reasons behind them. And because there's so many assumed like right ways, healthy ways to live, we don't realize how much even feeling like you're living healthy is a coping mechanism. Like, I'm a healthy person, because it's like, if everyone's at this baseline, like there isn't a way to necessarily shift reality so that you are better. You can only think about yourself as better. And as soon as you do, it's like there's a distance from everyone else. And you very much become alone. And whether you're thinking about yourself really positively or thinking about yourself really negatively, like there's going to be an assumption about everyone else, as opposed to a recognition that maybe it's always that baseline. We're always at a variation of the same sort of thing, instead of being alone in your experience or feeling like you're, above anyone and then needing to judge, like by default.
Yeah. The something I love about that list is that it doesn't work for long, and you have to update it all the time. Because I just want to point that
You got
out.
to keep it in mind.
You do, but those soothers, they need switching out like faster and faster. Is when I started to notice.
Yeah.
Is that because I started to notice that the soothers didn't work for long, and I started to expect them to not last for long, and so they started to have a shorter and shorter lifespan until it was like, God damn it, I need to switch out the soothers every 1 minute. It was just, oh my goodness.
Here comes depression.
Here comes depression, right? Because now I've realized there's no soother that will ever work for long, and now I feel doomed. I feel hopeless. I feel like there's no silver lining. There is just despair. And that feels like a self-imposed fucking curse, but it's not. It's okay to realize that no soother will last for long. And it's also okay to realize that you don't fucking need them. But you can't realize that you don't need them until you realize that they don't work and that you still exist and you still have more responses than fear to that realization. And just realizing that it's an ongoing process. You're going to be continuing to feel like you've got it and you don't have it. But just keep going, because one perspective is never the truth. So if you feel like you've got it, you feel like you don't, just take that with a grain of salt. It's just keep going, because you can.
Yeah, well said.
And I'm telling you, like, when you start looking at those habitual responses or things you typically do in response to your list of things, the morning routine, like, oh man, my morning routine used to be like so locked in, and it was like these 3 hours in the morning to make sure that I felt okay about myself for the rest of the day. And no matter what happened, it was like, oh, I could think back and be like, oh, well, I worked out, meditated, was grateful for all these things, like went through all these processes, and therefore like I did something correctly. And then it's not that it makes everything else better or worse, but it kind of, again, it's like a sensitivity thing. Like, how involved in each moment are you, or are you focused on getting to the next thing? And we kind of like the point A to point B, we don't think, like, so much of our lives and days can be just like this blank area, or at least feels like that, just because we're trying to get somewhere else or thinking about something else in response to what's happening right now, and then not really being there for it because we're uncomfortable in feeling the fullness of like being alive right now without needing to think about yourself. There's more.
No,
or less. Or less.
The sensitivity thing is the fun part, because that's where you're really in the nitty gritty now, is when you're actually feeling that shit. But then the temptation comes to tell yourself that you're in there, right? And then you have to ask yourself, do I need to believe that? And alternatively, do I need to deny that? Because there's both ends of the spectrum. Because you can admit, yeah, I'm in the present. I'm just feeling this shit out. I'm being honest. I'm doing my best. You can actually be at peace with what you're doing. Or are you telling yourself that?
One ticket sold.
and then the question is, or maybe you're telling yourself you're not, right? Because it's when you're not telling yourself anything that you are. And that's the hard part. That's where we're like, but I want to think about it. I want to make it part of the story, right? And that's why it's fun. It really is. It's like threading an infinitely finer needle. You just, like, every time you're like, I see a layer. Seeing that layer? Fuck.
Right.
Yeah, and there's always that opportunity, but it's still like the beauty in it is that it's, no matter how long you go focused on something, it's like it's still your response right now. Like, as much as it can feel like, oh, well, then I gotta maintain it, it's like, no, because you don't have to worry about not, or like focused on something else, because it's still your response right now. And like the opportunity's always there to like be cool with what's going on, but then you're paying more attention, and then there are more things there that have nothing to do with you, or like your habits or your opinions or your preferences. And if you don't then do those things as you're paying attention, like what makes most sense right now, then and you start thinking about it and you're aware that you're doing it, like thinking can very much become like a visceral sort of experience. Like, and I think that is what you see. And this is just from my own experience. I don't know necessarily other people, but like I've had times where I'm like pacing around, like so tense and like, or like physically like slapping myself in the face for doing something. And you catch yourself and you're like, holy fuck, like so much of that is coming from this thing that's going on and trying to assume or do something that's then going to make you more and figuring out the right thing to do and
reacting to it like it's real.
Like it's real.
Like it's real. That's what it is. And that's what I was saying before about, you know, how the brain doesn't seem to understand that the world of self-thought is different than the physical world. It responds to us having our identity threatened in the same way it responds to us being threatened by a predator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We immediately tense up like there's an actual danger.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain does not understand that the us that we're thinking about isn't us. It's not the same as our body, but the brain doesn't get that. They're like, oh, thinking about myself, that's in danger.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that can't be in danger. It's not a real thing.
Yeah.
Right? But our brain doesn't get that. And so we suddenly get flooded with adrenaline, right? And all of these different chemicals when somebody's like, you're a fucking idiot. And you're like,
You feel that.
Whoa.
Yeah, that can.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like a wave of fear and shit. And it's fear of what? That somebody has randomly judged you based on their own shit? It has nothing to do with you at all.
Translated.
Exactly. Brain doesn't get that.
Right. Right. Well, the brain doesn't, it's like the brain doesn't acknowledge imagination is a thing. It's like, and there's a perfect example of this, which is with actors. You know, when actors are portraying a certain traumatic experience, their brain feels like if they have gone through that traumatic experience, whether they are killed or molested or raped, or they feel like they went through all of those things, and they are an actor, and they're not actually going through any of those like things fully. But the brain does not know the difference, and we are the same way, where even though we're not on a physical stage, the hypotheticals that we think about are played on the stage of our mind, and our brain doesn't know the difference between a play and real life. Whether it's on a physical stage or the stage in your mind, it does not know the difference. It does not know that the imagination creates things that aren't happening. It thinks that there is nothing but what it sees. That perception is reality. And we have so many examples of that. And I love the actors, because some of them go to therapy. Some of them have to go for treatment after they've done a certain role, because they've taken on, I mean, Heath Ledger. Oh my God, yes, seriously, man.
People have committed suicide after watching movies. You
That's
know,
so
like
true.
straight up The Matrix, man. People committed suicide after that movie came out.
Yeah.
Straight up. Like, and it's because they couldn't tell the difference between the perception of a possibility versus what is actually there. And it happens.
That's just one.
Absolutely.
Isn't actually, it's like maybe slightly representative, but it's still not actually.
Well, and this is how it's funny, because like my daughter didn't grow up with television, like in terms of cable and commercials and all that. It was always just like things that I would get, you know, whole series, no commercials, nothing like that. But it was always very, you know, chosen according to certain things, right? And so where was I going with this?
Celeste.
Yeah, before that.
Perception.
That was it. So we'd watch movies, and as we'd escalate the range of the movie, like all of a sudden we were in like children's horror movies, like Coraline or Monster House, things like that. Well, all of a sudden she had never seen these things. Oh God, Home Alone 2. There's a perfect example where Marv gets electrocuted in the basement of the house by Kevin, who gleefully does so.
Yeah.
Okay. And they amp up the quote unquote graphics from the 90s. And all of a sudden he's like screaming and he's getting shocked, and his hair gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden he's just a skeleton, and the skeleton is screaming. And my daughter had never seen anything like that up until this point. Everything had been very realistic, or everything had been very cutesy and comfortable and everything else. And she just started crying. She was, I think, like 5 or 6 or something like that. She just started crying, and she's like, he's hurting. And so a big lesson was reminding Celeste, it's not real. And so her and I started
right,
looking
it's
at
not.
behind the scenes stuff
Mhm.
on how these movies were made. Right, she started listening to the actors and stuff, talking about their experience in making the movie, things like that. Like there's the actor who played Marv actually talks about the scene with the nail where he had to step on it in the
Yes.
first movie and the tarantula.
Oh,
And so she got to hear these stories of like, oh, he's okay.
yeah.
He's okay. It's not real. And then when we'd escalate it more as she got older, we'd start watching, more intense movies. She'd get caught up. I go, what is it not? She's like, it's not real.
It's not.
Right. And that would give her serious grounding into stories as a whole. And that's, I think, what has contributed to her incredible imagination is because she doesn't feel like she gets lost in it. She's still very much anchored here with the understanding that's not what is. That's not happening.
And so even being able to like go back and reference those throughout, because like most of the time you're a teenager, like most people are telling you that all that shit in your head is real, like my opinion of things, like, and just indoctrinating you with their own opinions, their own perspectives, their own, like, without even realizing how much passing off like their deeper things based on their own insecurities about reality, based on their response to certain things, like
the sins of the father.
Even just like lifting weights. Again, not to say it's a bad thing at all, but it can become something that is blown out of proportion, a way you measure yourself, like with everything.
A soother.
Exactly. But like that's the case with everything. And so therefore it's like also doesn't have to be the case with everything, like every single thing. And maybe there's certain things that have more of a way for you to like think about yourself in a certain way, or they're based in more egotism. I don't know, like actions that you take, but there's still like even doing the most selfless things, like you can start thinking about yourself as a selfless person and disconnect yourself from everyone else and just assume that like, and that's again with like helping people, being helpful, like very much the case. And deep down it's there's still responses. There's still responses. And it's like so much of self-help and whatnot is like ways to think about yourself differently. Like build yourself up, feel good about yourself, self-love. It's like careful.
Yeah. Self-love can quickly become just masturbation.
And like narcissism.
Yeah, but it's either you're putting yourself up on a pedestal or you're putting yourself in this pit of this hellish pit for one, and in both instances you're disconnected from everyone, whether you're on the pedestal or you're in the pit.
Straight up. One thing I wanted to mention is I am looking forward to the gym series that will inevitably happen as we go to the gym here in Nanaimo. We found a dope gym nearby, and what I loved about it is we met one person, and that person's like, yeah, no one ever comes in. We're like, you're sold.
Yes, that's right.
You've got us on
we
that.
may never mention the name of this gym.
We'll never mention the name of this gym. It's far, far away, and you'll never go there.
That's right. That's right. And they, only lit by candles.
But I was thinking about that because you're doing the docu series now, which is a lot of fun. But nothing to say that we can't share things that we learn at the gym. Like there are things that improve our health. We can share those movements at the gym, make little videos about it and whatnot. But it'll be great because we can include parts of us at the gym where nobody's talking about. Like, yeah, man, I took off like 10 pounds. I'm down to this now. My body.
Biceps are half an inch bigger.
I've been really working the brachialis muscle right here on the side of my arm, and I'm starting to see the veins pop through, and I'm really enjoying it.
My veins started popping out of my neck yesterday. I'm so pumped, man.
Straight up, one of my goals, not that long ago, was to be able to see my right bicep vein, because I was always able to see my left one, and there's like a little more, I don't know, like not to get too bro-y technical, but a little more body fat distribution on my right arm. I think I did get it measured one time, and they gave me a breakdown of everything. And even that, like seeing, and again, but like seeing not how like far I've come, but just like there have been points in my life where I've been very, 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 habitually self-involved with like everything. Everything.
Welcome to humanity.
Yeah, I know. Straight up, that's like how you gain context for every interaction.
Oh, you have no choice. You have to go through the world of I gotta fucking survive.
Mhm.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
Like, we call it selfishness, but it's straight up an infant with no fucking bodily ability trying to survive. That's why we learn how to manipulate parents,
Absolutely.
right? That's why kids learn how to manipulate their
Tiny
parents.
terrorists,
Because
I call
otherwise
them.
they're not going to get what they want. And they have
Right.
no other way to get what they want. They
Of
can't
course.
physically push their way into a
Mhm.
situation, and thank God.
And they can't
Yeah.
like reason. They can't give you like considerations
Yeah,
that an adult
conversation
would.
about
Yeah, they
it.
can't
Yeah.
Could you
discuss this
imagine
with
if
you.
babies were born full size? They'd just be smacking people around. They'd be like, give me what I want.
Yeah. Why isn't everyone doing exactly what I want?
Or
living
mature
exactly
like
as
an
I want?
adult, and they're just like little people, like little adults.
Oh yeah,
like in
a
baby
Benjamin
form.
Button
It's
Oh
like,
my
type.
God.
you know, we really got to discuss my baby
Yeah,
food
but
diet.
yeah.
And you're like,
then
that's
they
so-
can't force their way because babies are forceful. Like, babies don't give a shit. They'll just scream at you.
Well, that's the thing. is
Well,
they may
that's
just
their weapon.
make your experience
Right?
brutal by crying.
But
Like,
if they had
crying
a
is
full size body, you bet they'd be smacking you around.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Bottle!
Yeah.
Bottle!
Oh my goodness.
Oh, and like the baby mentality in an adult, and realizing that like we haven't. I feel like I don't know how much we've shifted from those responses. You know,
Right.
like we have, but obviously, but
Watch
not
someone
in
who needs
massive
to get what they
ways.
want when they don't.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Plus, look at just Rush Hour Rage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's just
Yeah.
a tantrum.
Uh-huh.
Like, straight up.
Not changing reality. Oh, just
It's
this
so
like,
weird.
like just
Why are
cycling.
you in front of me?
Yeah.
And
How
if you
dare
watch
you?
a
You should be
baby
moving
tantrum, it's a full body thing. Like, when a baby tantrums, it's like their face gets red, their muscles start twitching, and they get all
Uh-huh.
shaky and shit. And,
Uh-huh.
and
A
when
little
you
ball
look
of fury.
yeah, now
Yeah.
just take that and distribute it over a larger body, so you don't see the shaking as much.
Hmm.
But sometimes you do though. I have seen people like foaming at the mouth at the wheel.
I know.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
like that's the best way to describe them. It's like they look like they're losing. The mind is lost.
Yeah.
They're not about to lose it. They've lost it. Then they're losing. They're having an adult tantrum.
Because there's no such thing as an adult or a child
Mhm.
or a teenager or an infant. These are just descriptions for a human going through the stages of evolution, going through the stages of
Yeah.
its own development. And it's so interesting to just watch that. You're like, oh shit, there's no graduation ceremony. Like, I don't suddenly stop being
Right.
any of those stages.
No.
I
no.
just tell myself I have.
Right.
And I remember the points in my life where I was like, almost an adult, almost
Oh
an
my
adult.
God,
It's
yeah.
kind of like my daughter. I'm like, yeah, you're pretty much like, you're almost a grown up. She's like, no, I'm not 18 yet. I'm like, there is no imaginary line.
No,
Like,
she is far
that-
more
right,
grown up
right.
than a lot of grown
That
ups.
But what
Twice her age.
changes other
Seriously.
than the story we tell ourselves?
Yeah.
Right. And I love the
Yeah.
fact that she's hesitant to call herself an adult, because that shows more maturity. It shows more of a willingness to realize there's more to learn.
Mhm.
How many teenagers are like, oh, I'm a grown up. I know what I'm doing. I know fucking everything. It's like, you don't know shit. You don't even know how much you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know there's things you don't know you don't know.
It keeps going, man.
It's like this tiny little room. They're like, I know the whole thing. I know it all. But it's that perspective that like you can only know how much you know. And so even judging your, like when you become more maybe aware, or, just aware of how little you know too, it's like judging yourself for doing that isn't going to help you learn more. It's just going to like keep you in the same spot, kind of assuming that it should have been different previously, instead of like, okay, I'm where I'm at right now. I don't know exactly what I know or don't know. Like everyone's on this kind of infinite spectrum, like you can't possibly get through knowing everything about everything. Like there's so many variations. You dig into one thing and there's an infinite
Yay for mortality. I
depth
just
to
want to say
everything, right? And so
mortality's awesome.
it's always, it is, there's an appreciation for it too.
You only get so much time. What do you want to learn?
Creates priority.
Creates priority. Because if
Very
you
much
had
so.
forever,
Yeah.
you'd
And
be
how-
like,
Yeah.
man.
Oh my gosh. And like to be comfortable, we kind of just want that, despite and not really looking at the mortality side of it. Like keep wanting the same thing because it's less comfortable to try new things, do new things, explore new ways of experiencing life or places to live. And when it is looked at like wholeheartedly, the making the most of a situation, like it's harder, so much harder to not do, because it's like you always have that opportunity to do that. And
Yeah. I like how you said that. We don't look at our mortality, and it's because we turn it into the boogeyman under the bed. You know, it's like, I can't look at it. It's terrifying under there. You know, anything could happen under that bed. And we don't want to look at it. We turn it into this monster. Like, it's something you can't look at. We're not looking at it. We say that we can't. And we act like it's this thing that is this foe, this ultimate foe. And our mortality is a great gift, you know, because of exactly the reason stated already, you know, because it creates priority, because it lets you know that there is only a limited amount of time in this experience. So make the most of it, because you can't live a moment twice. You know, you can't make your choice again, you know, like, and you don't need to, right? Because even when I have made choices, right, that I'm like, man, if I had known what I know now, right? And I remember that saying, it's like, I wouldn't have done that, right? But I only say that now because I did that, because I realized that I prioritized a preference over the moment, because I prioritized someone else's hypothetical experience over mine, you know, and I couldn't have learned those things if I didn't prioritize my perception of how I was viewed, about how I thought somebody else was, you know, wanted, you know, and so I appreciate those considerations. And the phrase that comes to mind is like that forgive and forget. But it's like, I don't need to forgive because we're all just doing our best. And I don't want to forget because I appreciate those considerations that only can help me deepen my own experience. And that's about as best as I can do. But I don't need to do more. I don't want more.
that is such a full experience. Like that experience.
That's fair.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's it really does change our perspective of things. Like just imagine such a perspective shift where instead of fearing death, you look at your life, your individual version of life itself, because you're all of it, simply as an opportunity to see things the rest of you can't see. And in doing so, impact the whole. It would change all of our stories, even some of the most fucking traumatic, like childhood death, you know, kids who die of cancer, things like that. Like, we would learn something different from this instead of, you know, looking at it as, oh my God, like this is such an incredible loss. We could be looking at this from the whole going, what the fuck is giving our kids cancer?
Yeah. What kind of environment are we creating that supports cancer?
Right. Like, what kind of environment are we?
Yeah.
You know, that isn't somehow perpetuating this. Not saying that we're to blame for our kids getting cancer, but to say that over time, like chemicals in the water, chemicals in the air, chemicals in the food,
We have influence.
like we have influence, and that influence is strictly in what we do individually,
Right.
in what we perpetuate. And you can see that in any product that suddenly just disappears because people stopped buying it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so we have a lot of impact, but it's like, oh, well, we become so worried about where we're going after death that we forget the reason for our life, which is to inform the whole. All of us are informing the whole through our experience, but we think of ourselves so individually that we can't see that we're part of the whole. And that's where a lot of our loneliness comes from. That's where a lot of our lack of purpose, quote unquote, comes from. Because what more purpose can you need than you are the whole, that you are literally doing recon on paths through life that no one else can do?
That's right.
No one else can live your life. No one can see the things that you're going to see, can experience the things that you're going to see, feel the things you're going to feel. No one, even twins don't experience the same shit.
No.
As soon as they're on different paths.
I love that.
No one can experience your life. You are the only person that can inform us of what value comes from your journey. You're the only one, and we need you. You know, whether we realize it or not, you are fundamental. We are all changed by you. Just value your life for what it is, your expression, your unique addition to everything. You know, but it's an addition in the same way as water in a pond. Like, you are not separate from the rest of the pond. There's just a clump of water that you look at as you.
Yeah. That's right. Splash, splash. You know, make those ripples as only you can, because you are the only one that has your considerations, your experience, and that's why I love chatting with people. I'm chatting with people from all walks of life or different expressions, because there's always something that I can learn. And I appreciate that I learned that lesson, or I had that consideration made to me early. My mom was like, whether you're talking to a CEO or somebody who is homeless on the street, everybody has something that they can share. Everyone has something that they've experienced that only they've experienced. And you can learn from them. So make sure that you don't put anyone on pedestals or anyone below you, because we all have something to offer if you're willing to acknowledge it and accept it. Those who have ears to listen will, but you won't hear someone's individual experience if you think that it is less than or better than yours. Because we're all in a level playing field, because we all just are here living moment by moment, doing the best that we can, winging it, having our highs, our lows. And so it is important to remember that, just because every voice is worth listening to, that it's going to be louder than yours. We all have something to share, but you have to experience that, or you have to feel that way yourself, because when someone else is telling you that, it's hard if you keep believing the same old story that you tell yourself, that your voice is not worth listening to. And I ask, for you to question that, because are you entirely sure that what you have to offer isn't worth listening to, or is it just because you've made that judgment that you think it's not worth sharing?
Are you thinking about it again?
Are you thinking about it?
As opposed to just being it. That is the question.
Just share it.
Just be yourself. There's no how. There's no how to be yourself. It's not something you can stop doing.
No.
It's not something you can stop doing, but you can be yourself pretending to be someone else. You can be yourself wondering what that means. You can be yourself doing all of these things that make you feel like you're not yourself.
Right.
Doesn't mean you've ever not been yourself.
That's
you
right.
can stop all of those things and suddenly, poof, you're there at the place you've never left.
I was authentically not being me.
Learning a lot as I went about the consequences of not just being myself, or just thinking in that experience, like, what world do you want to create? It's not anything you say. It's not anything you do. It's not anything express even. It's like your response right now, like how relaxed you are in response to yourself right now. Like it's fascinating how much we can, like, because I don't know, the world that we're in right now, like, there can very much be a right way to be yourself, or like not specifically, but overarching ways to be yourself. And like when you're not doing that as much, like when you're not doing the habitual ways to feel like you're being yourself, you wonder like what there is there, like what experience there is. But if everyone's just, responding to those sorts of feelings in ways, not willing to feel them, then even just feeling everything, like not buying back into the habitual patterns is a response. And then then you start learning, and like that process of growing up, it's not gonna feel comfortable necessarily, because comfort was a way to avoid it. Like staying comfortable, like imagine a baby who just never did much outside of the crib and got fed and then just got bigger. Like there would be little variation in that. It'd be a lot tougher, a lot easier to assume that anything outside that crib is dangerous.
Right? They wouldn't learn how to walk. They'd get so big that they would have no reason to walk.
Because comfort's another soother. I mean, comfort is the soother. That's the whole point. Like, comfort is the response to discomfort instead of just the acceptance of it until it becomes familiarity, right? Like, that's the thing, is comfort and discomfort have their own cycle in the same way that, fear and faith have their own cycle, right? And so you just go through it. But it's just kind of like recently you guys moved out here, and there was this whole week where everyone, including me, was just like, what the fuck?
Right.
Because everything was different. Everything was new. Yeah. Including how much time we were spending together. Right? All of that was new. And it's like, what do we do? It's like, just wait it out. Yeah. That's really all you can do.
Keep going.
Just keep going.
try not to make it worse for yourself.
Keep going.
But then the brain all of a sudden starts going, oh, right. This isn't, because most of what we're going through is the possibilities of what if, which is just the brain trying to assess fear and danger, right? So you're just going through all of these new what ifs because of all the new uncertainty. Well, the brain's just going through cycles. And if you get caught up in that shit, you're fucked, right? But if you don't, if you're just like, okay, I'm just going to keep going through this and not panic, right? And if you do panic, don't panic about panicking, right? Fuck, don't make
Panic
it worse,
squared, man.
right? Just straight up.
That shit will get.
It's a deadly explosion.
But then what happens is that the brain almost gets tired of its own bullshit after a while. Like the brain starts
Thank
cycling
goodness.
through fears, and then after enough time, it goes, okay, those haven't happened. There might be other shit I should worry about, and so it just switches gears, right? But that's what I mean by the process of familiarity. Like all of a sudden, the brain's just like, oh yeah, that's not okay. I don't need to put so much time into that, unless you're perpetuating it. Yes, you do. Yes, you do need to put more time into that. Exactly. And you can do that. It's like it starts to come to slow down and you just fucking kick it back into high gear instead of just letting it run its cycle through and moving on. But that's it. It's very much looking at like change as an earthquake. I said this previously. Go through a massive change. All of a sudden, everything's just all over the fucking place. And you don't know what to do. Just wait until it calms down.
Find a doorway.
Right? But recognize there's going to be aftershocks.
Yeah.
There's going to be aftershocks. The bigger the change, the bigger the aftershock, because it's just a matter of time before your brain cycles through enough of those things, makes them familiar, and then finds a whole new batch of things that you weren't even thinking about. You're like, oh my God, and my new neighbor's a bitch. You know, like, and so now all of a sudden you got to worry about whether or not you moved into the right place and what the neighbor might do and call the cops or some stupid shit. Like, it just changes all of your perspectives again, and your brain's like, oh, new dangers. And if you panic, it can't run its cycle through. It can't process as easily because you're putting yourself in there trying to establish control over something that's only a potential. It's only a potential, but we take it as reality.
Oh, for sure. Like the amount of shifts that just we've actively been going through. And I've made this sort of assumption on top that like I should be doing better or doing more or going through, you know, more changes, trying more new things on top of, and like almost passing off the reality that like, oh, I'm going through big changes right now in my life, moves, shifts, you know, everything you talked about, us hanging out a lot more, like all the time, like doing all new content too. Like this is brand new. As much as I've done social media for 4 years, like, you know, a lot of that was, I'm not going to say hidden, I've said it before, but like under control more so. And now so much more of what we post is live, is filmed live, is live. But that's, you know, conversations are live, you know, and there's this practice in conversation, you know,
Life
practice in experiencing. Exactly. And because like that feeling of comfort, discomfort, danger, not danger, when it's like, it's crazy how much we can create this sense that like, or this assumption that of danger, basically just from new things. And so that, you know, looking back at my life, like going through a new high school, you know, for example, I went to 3 high schools, and each and every time there was like a period, sometimes it was big, sometimes it was not as big, of like, you know, closing off, being afraid, like it feeling like a dangerous thing because everything's so uncertain. There isn't this established understanding or like assumption about certain things or sense of like, oh, all these things I'm afraid of like aren't actually going to happen. This is very much me assuming a sense of danger and then trying to control it or trying to do things where it's like I feel like it can be under control. And so, you know, each high school I went to, like it got the period of shift or like of sense of danger or feeling like comfortable, it got smaller and smaller. But then that continues, like as you continue doing new things, like there's that opportunity again, especially as you get older. I think like those a big shift that you make, and that's a lot of people have like midlife crises because maybe something they assumed for a while wasn't working as much, or it's like this big change and it can feel jarring. But that sense of danger, it's so, like we were talking about it before, like it's so fascinating how like right now we're just like, when you were talking about it, I was like, fuck, I'm just sitting here on the live stream. Like, there is nothing to be. It's not like,
And we're enjoying your company.
It's like, oh yeah, a couple days ago, some dude came in with a knife, and like, we got to be aware of that. Like, there's tigers outside, the window's open, like they might jump through. Exactly. Like, there's very, very little opportunity for like actual physical danger.
Straight up.
But you can, like, any situation you can be afraid of, and it's all in your head. Like, it's all you're thinking about it, and then any responses are also most of the time conceptual. And if someone does scream in your face like, oh, you're a fucking idiot, piece of shit, like, then they're clearly going through something too, if they're willing to express that. And the rest is uncertain and just kind of like coming from yourself. Like, all the assumed judgments that you're afraid of are coming from you.
Yeah, it's so important to recognize that they're coming from you. It's the only place they can be coming from. You, even if the people are judging you for that, you wouldn't care if you weren't judging yourself
first.
So it comes down to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not judging yourself, then you actually start to realize why you were. See, and that's the fun part, is you have to stop to see why you were doing it. You have to go, oh, there's another option. But we don't. Judgment to us is one of our first tools. It's a way of course correcting. I'm doing it right. I'm doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And school is very happy to condition us to think that way. Right? And so we learn judgment real early. It's not until we start to go, oh, maybe there's another way to live. But we go through the I guess, journey of not just judging ourselves, but judging others by contrast. And so the whole first part of that journey is just, how do I feel better than others?
Yeah. How do I compare? And I love the example of school, because school typically shows you one way to learn. They don't show, when they introduce a topic to you, they don't show you multiple ways to learn that topic, right? For reasonable considerations. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so much school budget. There's only so much training the teachers can have, right? So typically they tend to give you one way to approach every topic, one way to answer every question. That process gets transferred across, someone's whole life. They don't think, oh, there's more than one way to possibly answer this question. Oh, there's more than one perspective. Oh, there's more than one way to learn this. They don't think that there is more than one way, because they weren't shown initially more than just one way to go through things. And I think that is such a disservice, because it's not like when they go home, they have their parents who are showing them, oh, well, if you're thinking about it from this perspective, have you considered this? Right? Because they're strapped and they're living life in one way. So I just think it's important to remember that we typically are shown how to process things in one way from one perspective, and there aren't. And that's why I love team projects, because even though in school you were taught one way, the minute that you're in a group setting, everyone brings a different perspective of that one way. And so that's probably the one of the very few times that you get to see that there's more than one way, more than one perspective to be considered. There's more than one perspective that exists.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, all the time. And like, we can forget that, because if you don't feel like you are doing it the right way, or you're in a new environment and you're trying, it's like you can almost try and figure out the right way. Like, oh, there's only one right way to do this, or assume that there's like certain wrong ways to do certain things. And then it's like figuring out one, the right way, and then trying to avoid the wrong way. So always like keeping yourself in check as you go. And like, neither of them are going to be the case. Like, there isn't this external like way to figure out, like, what does that even mean? You start thinking about the right way to live life. Is that like, a daily thing, a momentary thing? Like, how many different experiences do you have to be doing correctly?
Well, it's really simple, as long as you don't take in any new information.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because as soon as you do, it's like there are different perspectives to consider.
That's why Christians are afraid of relative morality, of not having it set in stone. So when you introduce like a gray area to any of the commandments, they just short circuit. Right? And it's just because, no, that's not it.
That couldn't be.
You're right. And you're like, well, put yourself in that position. I would never. And that's why they do that, is because it keeps it simple. If there was gray area, it wouldn't be simple.
Be uncertain.
and then it'd be on you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be on someone else.
Correct.
It's like, oh shit, there's a gray area. Well, what are you three doing? And then it's like two of them say one thing and one of them says another, and so you pick what the two are doing, and then all of a sudden it's like someone else asks, and it's like, oh, what are you four doing? And it's like the three are doing that, and then it becomes this like, you know, less of a gray area just by everyone else feeling like doing it, and then assuming that they're doing it the right way just to fit in. Like the right way is just what causes the least amount of conflict in the experience, like based on your environment, based on the experiences that you've had, like conflict within yourself or conflict in the environment, and based on like what you're prioritizing, you're going to try and like, you can start trying to control everything. And as soon as there's this desire to control some response to what you're doing, like there can be physical responses to it. Like it can be tension, then that gets like experienced like
nausea
through everything.
Illness. Well, your immune system drops. Like there's so many. You look at stress; it's the fucking silent killer. It contributes to so many of our problems.
Decline.
Straight up. Right, and it's just that. And where does that stress come from? Fictitious dangers. More often than not, because real dangers you will do something about.
Yeah.
You know, somebody comes in the house with a knife, you're gonna club that motherfucker over the head with a chair or whatever the hell you can, you know, or you're gonna run like a smart person. Yeah, I'm just saying, if you can run, run.
Yeah.
But you're gonna do something about it. You're not just gonna sit there judging yourself. Oh God, somebody's in the knife. I knew I should have locked the door. You know, like you're
next time, stab.
Right? You're gonna do something about it, and that's the difference. Is the shit in your head? You'll notice you can never really do anything about it because it's always gonna pop back up. You know, it's always going to be there as a temptation to judge yourself for whatever you've done, for any choice you've made, for any action you've taken, for how anybody can look at you, judge you. You can judge yourself for anything, and you always will be able to. And it's unreasonable for you to ask for a period in your life where that ability is not there. It was one of your very first abilities. Yeah. Use it. Learn from it. Don't try to get rid of it. You know, understanding judgment is understanding where a great deal of humanity is languishing. And if you're judging yourself for judging yourself, you're just making it worse, right? You have to accept these things, including the fact that you will always perceive things about yourself that you may not like. And that's what helps inform you to not be those things. That's why you don't like them. You're like, I don't want to go down that path. Good. Aren't you glad you had the thought? Because had you not had the thought, you might have went down that path without even thinking about it. You know, it's an intrusive thought. Only if you want to be a dick. Right? Isn't that funny? It's not intrusive if it's helping you. But we often don't recognize it's helping us. And it is. So again, just keep going forward. Let go. Do the best you can to just be. And if you're not, you still are. It's not something you have to force. We have like 10 minutes left. I wanted to say two things very quickly. The first is that the November Port Alberni retreat tickets are going to be available to Tier 2 Patreon supporters this afternoon after our Tier 3 exclusive call on Patreon. After this, we have our Tier 2 call on Sundays and a Tier 3 call right after. So we have like 3 hours of just shooting the shit. If you would like to join us, we would love to see you there. This is, again, the new schedule. But, again, Port Alberni retreat tickets afterwards. What is that, like 3:30 or 4:30 Eastern time? I'm going to say 4:30 Eastern time. Sounds about right. So if you are waiting for those tickets, jump on them because we've already sold over half of these tickets. If you're a Tier 3 supporter and you're listening to this live right now and you haven't got your ticket, I'd recommend getting your ticket in the next 2 hours, just because I know there's a number of Tier 2 supporters that are looking to come to this event because it's going to be dope. It's going to be amazing. We're going whale watching. We have a chef. We're in this giant ass lodge. Oh God, live music. We even might have Fidelium come down and play for us at least once, which would be amazing. A very private performance. 17 people in a lodge listening to a
Sounds
professional level
magical.
violin band. Oh my God.
Outstanding musicians.
Which brings us to Friday night. What happened on Friday night? We went out and first we hooked up with Jeff and Trish and had a beer and some nachos at a local pub. Fantastic conversation. Talked about the upcoming 10th anniversary of the Nanaimo Fiddle Society and some possible things that we might be doing with them going into the next year. Super exciting there. We also talked to a local business owner, somebody who owns a bar currently and is opening one of the largest new karaoke bars in Nanaimo. We discussed with them how to help promote, but also having our own designated karaoke night where Dualistic Unity is going to host karaoke and live stream the karaoke onto our Instagram channel. So you will be able to join us, not just Instagram, but Twitch and YouTube Live and all that. It's going to be everywhere. So if you would like to join us to cheer those people on, we got to find a way of like putting the comments on a screen.
Right.
That'd
Hey,
be dope.
like a second screen that's got the comments
Yeah.
on there. That would be really interactive right
That'd
there.
be
We would
great.
have to monitor that. Again, it's at a bar, so people are 21 plus. So like someone starts posting something
Exactly.
derogatory, we don't necessarily.
Here they're 19 plus.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I did enjoy that, by the way. It's funny because we're not in the United States, and in British Columbia, the legal drinking age is 19 or over. And a couple of nights back, we had somebody join us at the table who was 20, and both Amanda and Andrew had this look on their face of, I can't believe this person's sitting with us. So that was entertaining as shit.
Oh, I was just getting a clip for the docuseries today. By the way, if anyone hasn't checked it out, we have 4 episodes live now as of last night. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun to create, showing the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh,
to
I've been
business,
loving it.
including everything that we're doing. Because a lot of people are like, what is Dualistic Unity? What are you guys doing? So it's like we can talk about it, but we like showing it too. So
What I've been enjoying is the randomness of your clips, because occasionally we're just hanging out and all of a sudden you're recording. And so lately, instead of doing the quickly curate for Dualistic Unity, I just say the same random crazy shit that I say with you guys when I'm not being recorded. So that's been fun for me.
it's been a fun process, and like it's like a new thing. It's like a new way, and still like, and realizing even from early on how like, okay, I could try and make this like vlogs I've seen, like things I've seen, or I could just like not really think much at all as I'm doing it and just piece things together based on a type of movie I would want to create or home video I'd want to create. And so it's been fun being able to practice that too.
Yeah, they're fun. I'm rather enjoying it. And what I like is how authentic it comes across as. It really does.
Yeah, that's been cool.
It's a hell of a ride, everyone.
But yeah, Friday night, holy shit, that was in Sweet Spot Lounge. I'm pumped.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently 200 people, like Corner Lounge, which you'll see on our social media stories from time to time. Like, it's an awesome spot. It's like really cool and a great place to like, you know, they do karaoke 7 days a week, 9 to 1:15, and it's a more intimate environment, and a lot of times not super crowded outside of like, you know, the busy days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But we go on Mondays, and it's actually, there's starting to be a bit more of a crowd for sure.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna start posting our Nanaimo social schedule as well. But I've it's hitting me more, and like definitely did the last day or two, like how much you can make your environment like your own in the sense, and really like make the most of it. Like over the next year in Nanaimo, like we can do a lot of shit just by being out and about and doing things. And like, it's really like, that's really cool that it's this sort of perfectly sized city where within not a super long period of time, like you can do a lot of shit, meet a lot of people if you're just putting yourself out there.
Yeah,
And like
the audacity to be you.
up.
Yeah.
Showing up.
Because everybody underneath it all wants to do that. We all just want to be able to show up.
Mhm.
And that's why you'll find that the conversations are often with people who resonate, whereas the people who are not trying to be themselves typically stay away, or they judge, or they're that group of guys that come to one of the pubs where they stand as far as they can from the karaoke bar, right, or the karaoke stage, but close to the bar, and then they judge everybody who goes up for karaoke, but they spend the entire night not talking to anyone but themselves.
Right.
Each other.
Right.
Exactly.
And that's all that they do. And it's just because
been there.
they're going there for a point. They're not going there for karaoke,
Mhm.
because that would require some degree of authenticity and vulnerability and all that. They're going there because of the amount of girls that go to karaoke
That
who
they
are
don't talk
there
to.
for karaoke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's why it's funny, because you'll
That's why
see
they're there that night.
like a guy who isn't talking to girls all night long will go up on stage, sing, and all of a sudden get off stage, walk through the bar, and two girls will be like, "Hey, I saw you sing." And there is an organic conversation
Right.
that starts with, "Hey, I saw you go up there and be courageous. Hey, I saw you up there go up there and be
You were
authentic."
awesome.
Right?
Great song.
That is a normal organic conversation that would not happen if you didn't just go up there. Right?
Do
Just do it
something.
for
Do
you,
something.
especially because if you go up there and you're doing it for the crowd, all they see is a showboat.
Yep.
All they see is somebody up there
Feel it.
making it, and you can feel it, right? You can feel it when people are up there to be seen, as opposed to up there to sing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cool, like the organic nature of all those. How much time do we have?
We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. Yeah, it's exciting to just like be able to do those thing. I don't know. Hold on. Like, man, sometimes it's like, oh, there was something right
Three
there.
different
and then
things
it's
just
like,
happened.
whoop.
You,
I know,
like, you
right?
checked the screen, you had a tangent. I clicked the screen
and
and
it's
put
so
a message
funny.
up there. You're like, should I read that?
It's so funny how I can feel like I'm like, oh, I can usually track all those things. Like usually be able to do that and then still like tap in. It's like, what am I basing that off of? And a lot of times it's like, having sort of habitual ways of thinking or habitual responses to things instead of just like jumping in and doing stuff. But yeah, it was with the karaoke, like, and with everything, like just jumping in and doing things and then not measuring yourself as you go. Because again, with the changes and shifts, like overarch, as much as every experience feels very unique and individual, and that is the case, like there are overarching shifts in your life that then are gonna, reverberate, that earthquake of change. Like you don't expect that to have impact throughout the process of that change. And so just continuing to be willing to do that, to try new things, jump into new things, because you don't know what the response is going to be and you don't know what you're going to learn from it. And most of the time, you're not actually in danger. You're still going to go to bed at night and wake up in the morning with probably a bunch of other things that you're thinking about or potentially could judge yourself for, because that shit doesn't go away. The opportunity does not go away no matter what.
Yeah, definitely. Just consider that it can be felt when you're jumping for yourself or when you're jumping for a score from other people that they don't know that they're supposed to give you. So you can feel that. So definitely jump because you feel like jumping. Fuck the landing. You'll figure it out after you've made the jump, because you're going to be sensitive and attentive to that jump as you're in it instead of thinking about the score that you're never going to get.
Oh, that's great. Fuck the landing. It's funny because, we keep trying to brace for the landing. We don't even know if jumping's going to help us fly. It's been a great episode. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to continue on Patreon. I managed to actually post the details of that group mid-episode and wrote it in the post because I was so very excited that I could do that. We will see you in a little while. And don't forget, new schedule, which means tomorrow, Monday, I believe we start at 6 p.m. Eastern time.